What is going on, everybody, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Becoming Canadian podcast. I do want to start this one off with a massive thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to episode 1 over the past week. And I also want to thank those of you who may be binging this show for the first time sometime in the future. Now, I have received some amazing feedback over the last week, especially from friends of mine who I've known for a long time, who are just beginning to learn some new information that they didn't know before about my moving to Canada. I also want to thank everybody who's messaged me through social media, be it Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, who have immigrated to Canada or have immigrated from Canada, as I've had a lot of fun reading these messages and replying to you over the past week. I've also had some fellow podcasters comment on the show, which really is quite amazing considering we only have one episode, and it's certainly not something that I expected to receive at all, never mind by the end of the first episode. Now, I've also had a ton of other positive feedback through social media from people looking forward to this week's show, since I did leave a little bit of a cliffhanger on Katherine's first trip to Scotland. So without further ado, I'll put an end to the suspense that I've received through social media comments, and let's go back to before Canada with a trip to Glasgow. Last time on Becoming Canadian. In June, I was invited to attend a gaming event in my hometown of Glasgow called Insomnia Resonate. A gaming convention over 2 days about gaming, streaming, and afterwards you get a good night out in the pubs and clubs of Glasgow. Little did I know that Katherine also got the opportunity to come to the event, and we spoke about it for a couple of days, and eventually she booked a flight to come to Scotland in July. We spoke about the details, and we made plans to share an Airbnb between ourselves and one of our other friends, and everything was booked and confirmed within about a week. Now, over the next month, it would be discovered that we both actually had feelings for each other, but both of us didn't want to take it any further because we weren't sure how we felt and the distance was going to be hard. What we then decided to do was take this not just as an opportunity to meet as friends for the first time, but use this as the potential to be a weekend to decide just how much we actually like each other. In the weeks leading up to the trip, myself and Katherine continued to talk just as much as we already had, if not a little more, if that was even possible. She sent me an email with her itinerary for her flight, and everything was arranged for her daughter to stay with her parents while she was in Scotland for 3 days. And before we knew it, it was the day before her flight. She would arrive in Glasgow at 1:30 the next day, and I spent that night packing my bags and preparing myself for my trip from Dundee to Glasgow. The next morning, I woke up and travelled to Dundee bus station, a 10-minute walk from my house, and I got on a bus which took about 2 hours, and I spent the entire bus journey checking the flight. Did she get on it? Was it running on time? An assortment of different things were running through my brain for the entire bus journey. When I arrived in Glasgow, I got off the bus and got on the next one to Glasgow Airport, and about 20 minutes after arriving, my Irish friend SJ landed from her flight. "So, Ross, are you nervous?" was the first question she asked. Now, for anybody that knows me listening to the podcast, they all know I'm not a shy person. Pfft, me? That'll be right, is what I replied. But I think I said it more to convince myself than I did to convince her, as the butterflies were churning in my stomach. Katherine's flight from Toronto was still 3 hours away, so we took the time to go sort out our Airbnb and put our bags in before returning to Glasgow Airport. The airport was its usual busy self, but for me it felt slow and quiet as the nerves really set in. What if she thinks I look too different off camera? What if she doesn't like me? What then? Is what I constantly asked myself repeatedly while staring at the automatic doors of the arrivals bay of the airport after seeing the message that the Toronto flight had successfully arrived at the airport. And then she walked through the doors, with her curly red hair and a smile on her face, walking with her green backpack with the Canadian flag stitched on, and for the first time in my life, I had no idea how to react when it came to a woman. I stood there, frozen, like a deer in headlights. Katherine seen me too, and walked straight up to me, and without hesitation, she kissed me. Now, I'm not a sappy person, but I'd be lying to you if I said that in all reality, I don't remember anything that happened for the first few hours after that moment. It's a little bit of a blur. We were in my hometown of Glasgow, and I honestly couldn't tell you a single thing that we'd done apart from go back to the Airbnb if it wasn't for hindsight. Now, based on picture evidence, I can tell you that I took her to Tim Hortons. The first Tim Hortons not in North America, might I add. What a stallion. I know, right? Take the Canadian to a Canadian coffee shop. Smooth move, Casanova. Somehow, she didn't write me off as an idiot there and then, and later that night I took them both to an Irish pub in Glasgow city centre, a personal favourite of mine, and we had a nice meal and a few drinks, and just got to know each other better on a face-to-face basis. Then we went back to the Airbnb and called it a night and got ready for the first day of Insomnia Resonate. The next day, we all woke up early, got ready, and made our way in to the SEC for day one of Insomnia Resonate. It was fun, and the usual business event that these conventions tend to be for someone in the position I was in at that time, meeting with viewers, talking with vendors, and speaking with game developers, and all that sort of stuff was a standard at these events. Now, there was a group of guys from one stand, a PC building startup company, who we got on great with, and we made the decision to invite them out to the Irish pub after the event was done that day to have some drinks and continue to talk, and they accepted. We continued on with the day and the venue, and then we headed back to the Airbnb to get changed before heading to the pub. We had fun at the pub, and while we were there, drinking and socialising with the PC building guys, Katherine decided that she would like a whiskey. "I can get you one of them," exclaimed SJ as she headed off to the bar. Katherine disappeared at this point, I can only assume for a cigarette, and while I was sitting with the guys, I could see SJ standing at the bar ordering the whiskey. I see the bartender bend over and pull out a really old looking box, opening it and revealing a pristine glass bottle of whiskey. He then picks up a glass from the bar and carefully pours out a whiskey that by this point it was very obvious that SJ had asked for the best whiskey that they had in the bar. The bartender then put the bottle back in the box and returned the box underneath the bar, and SJ paid for the prestigious dram. Katherine come back and sat down, and SJ had brought over the fine glass of whiskey. "Thanks," exclaimed Katherine, before shooting the whiskey as if it was some apple sores or an absinthe shot. And at this point, it felt like everything had frozen. Did she just do what I think she did? I looked to the right of Katherine, and I seen the bartender, in shock, staring at Katherine at what he had just saw. And I couldn't hold it in any longer. I began laughing harder than I think I ever have before, and the reaction on Catherine's face is she had no idea that the whiskey she'd just devoured in one gulp was in fact a sipping whiskey, meant for enjoyment over a long period of time. And by this point, everyone at our table was laughing, and we continued our night before returning to our respective accommodations and prepared for the next day at the event. We did the same thing again pretty much the entire time of the conference, minus the whiskey shot, and we got ourselves ready to leave the Airbnb. The next morning, we headed to Glasgow airport and saw SJ off on our flight back home. Me and Katherine then prepared ourselves for our last night together. We headed to the hotel that I had booked in our initial arrangements, and I took Katherine to see some sights. Glasgow Necropolis, the Gallery of Modern Art, George's Square, and the City Chambers were just some of the places that I took Katherine to go see around Glasgow. All the places that a tourist should see when making a trip to the largest city in Scotland. We then went out for dinner and checked in for the night at the hotel before Katherine's flight home tomorrow. That morning, our alarms didn't go off. We grabbed our stuff in a massive panic and we headed to Glasgow airport. Katherine had missed her flight by 10 minutes. She went outside, made some phone calls, and made alternative arrangements for a flight with a stop off at Heathrow airport so that she could leave the same day. We said our goodbyes, and Katherine left to return to Canada. Now I'm going to call the episode here, guys, and next week we'll start off after Katherine's got back to Canada and what happened after this point. Now if you've enjoyed the podcast so far, why not give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, if you think we've earned it, of course. I will be reading out those reviews when they start coming in, so why not be one of the first people to be read out. You can also leave those reviews, for those of you not using Apple Podcasts, in the Discord server at discord.gg/becomingcanadian, or on our social channels, where you can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at BecomingCDNPod, or just by searching Becoming Canadian in the search bar. Now I have been working on the website and I'll be continuing to do that this week, so soon you will be able to see all the show notes at becoming-canadian.com, and I'll be adding a mailing list so that you guys can get the links to the episodes with some extra behind the scenes information each and every week. So keep an eye out for that coming. And I just want to take one last time to thank you all for listening to the podcast and also chatting with me on social media, either publicly or in private, as a lot of the messages that you guys have sent me really help me gauge interest in the show, which has been absolutely fantastic so far. Another thing that I completely didn't expect to happen is I've had quite a few people send me messages asking about what I use in order to record the podcast, be it the microphone, the editing software, all of that sort of stuff. And I had really contemplated to myself whether or not to make it part of this episode. I've decided that starting this Friday, I'm going to start an extra episode, a bonus as it were, called Footnotes. I'm going to do these every now and again, and the first one is going to be an introduction to podcasts from someone starting out themselves. In this episode, I'll give a little bit of information about what I use, the microphone, the editing software, my headphones, all that sort of stuff. And I'll also spend a little bit of time discussing my background a little bit further as I've had a few people ask me some questions about my broadcast experience as a live streamer. But anyway guys, I do hope you've all had a fantastic week. You don't have to listen to the episode on Friday if it doesn't interest you. I will continue the regular episode on Tuesday. So I do hope that you all have a fantastic week, and I will catch up with you all then. Bye bye.